And so as we look at the flesh, we say, well, how do I have a disordered desire? How do I know if I have a desire in my life which is out of order? Make sense? It's a good question. How do I even know this is true? That's another good question. Eugene Peterson, who is a Bible scholar, translated the Bible into, English or American English. He defined the flesh as this: the corruption that sin has introduced into our appetites and our instincts. Essentially, what is the flesh? The flesh is our base, primal, animalistic drives for self-gratification, especially when it pertains to sensuality and food. That includes sex and food, but to pleasures in general, to our instincts, survival, domination, our need for control. This is the flesh, okay? All of these base animal instincts. And here's the thing about this. This language is not unique to Paul. This is not a religious thing that I just laid out before you. Allow me to show you throughout time and history that the exact wording of the flesh has been used by every other thought process and culture. Here's the Buddha. You know the Buddha, right? He's about this tall sometimes, and he's round. The Buddha, in his wisdom, said, "In days gone by, this mind of mine used to stray wherever selfish desire or lust or pleasure would lead it. Today, this mind does not stray, and it is under the harmony of control, even as a wild elephant is controlled by the trainer." The Buddha said that my flesh, my animal instincts, is so difficult to control, he compares it to an elephant. This is the greatness of it. This is how hard it is. Plato, remember Plato? You played with it when you were a child? He pictured it as a chariot driver with two horses tied together, each one fighting for domination. One horse he called the love of honor with modesty and self-control. The other he called a companion to wild boasts and indecency, shaggy around the ears and deaf as a post. That as you are the chariot driver, you have these two horses. Instead of riding in unity with one another, they're constantly fighting one another. Again, compares it to two unmanageable beasts. Rabbis, right? Rabbis of Judaism taught that each of us were not one soul, but two souls, and that we had the two souls fighting against one another, and our goal as human beings was to overcome the evil soul, or the soul that sought to gratify itself and exalt the other soul. There's a transcendentalist named Henry. I want you to see here. This is not some religious gobbledygook. This is an understanding of mankind that we have this flesh, this base animal desire, this drive. Transcendentalist Henry David Thoreau, during his solitary soul-seeking time at Walden Pond, wrote, "We are conscious of an animal in us. It is reptile and sensual, and perhaps cannot be wholly expelled." He called it reptile. Interesting. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt simply calls the part of our brain our animal self. Leading brain expert Jeffrey Schwartz calls it our animal brain. And today, if you're listening to the wisdom of Joe Rogan and Elon Musk in a recent podcast, they said we are all just chimps. And if you watch Rogan's podcast, which I do not suggest, but he opens it with his logo's a chimp and the sound of a monkey, essentially saying, look, at the end of the day, we're all just our flesh. We're all our base animal instincts. But here's the thing with that. Not all desires are created equal, are they? Like, your desire to breathe is a greater desire than to eat cake. Not always, but a lot of times it is. It's a greater desire. So here's the thing. He says, all healthy, free people, we have to edit this mix of desires in our life, right? You have to edit them. You don't always get to do what you want. In fact, we know through science and the incredible increase in technology that there are especially two pleasure chemicals in our body, dopamine and serotonin, right? And so what we often do is we mistake these chemicals as they get released throughout our body, talking way too much, as to whether or not we are happy, or we are sad, or we are angry. I want to show you here that the idea that is presented in the Bible, the idea that Paul talks about the flesh, is not absent of an understanding of these chemicals in our body, but they coincide together. This is another great lie you've been told here in America, that science and religion are separate. Go back before the last 100 years. So go back to basically the thousands of years before the last 100 years. You want to know what they did? Science and religion worked in concert together. It's how they understood one another. They weren't separate things. They worked together. So, where does this lead us now, knowing that you have serotonin and dopamine? Well, when America was founded, officially, we were a country that recognized, like many other countries do, that there is an authentic authority. There's an authority outside ourself that we appeal to, whether it's God or the Bible or the government we've set in place. This is the authority. This is how it's pretty much always been. Whenever a country establishes itself, it's the king, it's the monarchy, right? This is the authority. Here in America, specifically in the last 60 years, we no longer look to anything outside of our authentic self as our authority. Think about this. My authentic self, I'm the authority. I'll determine what's right and wrong. I'll determine what's good. Not some old book, not some philosopher, not some government, definitely. I am. This came from a man named Sigmund Freud. Now, who's heard of Sigmund Freud? Right? Yeah, guy's a sex-crazed lunatic. And most of what he said has been torn apart by current modern-day philosophers and psychologists, and they're like, oh, he wasn't exactly right here. But it doesn't matter. What he said about sexuality and the base animal instincts have stuck in American psyche. It has stuck in our culture, and just like somebody on a defense, the prosecution or the defense, who say something that gets stricken from the record, good luck striking it from the minds of the jurors, right? So essentially that's what Freud did. He came in and said, life is about desire, and that whenever a person squelches a desire in themselves, they're oppressing. Whenever a desire in them is squelched by an outside source, they're being oppressed. It's a Monty Python. I'm being oppressed. You got it. Here's the deal with that. Before him, St. Augustine was really the foundation of thought for how we moved in freedom as Americans, and he held more to the traditional position that there is an outside source greater than ourselves, and that the problem with the human condition isn't that we don't love, it's that we love the wrong things. Now think about that. It's not that we're hateful and we don't love anything, it's that we love the wrong things. Now, if you, in your mind, just said, who are you to tell me what are the right and wrong things? You're an American. Good job. You have been listening to Freud and that thinking that has been perpetrating the schools and TV and everything else. Who are you to tell me what's right and wrong? Well, I'm not to tell you what's right and wrong, but there is someone who is. So here's the deal. It's not bad to love your job, is it? It actually would be wonderful if you loved your job, am I right? It is bad to love your job more than your children. Disordered desire. It's not bad to love your children, right? 3 people said right. If you're watching online, I want you to know that 3 out of a few hundred people said right. It's not bad to love your children. Right, there we go. But if you love your child more than God, then it's a disordered desire, and it's going to hurt both relationships, you and the child. It's not bad to love sex, amen? There we go. All right. That's more like it. God created it. He created us to be sexual beings. He created it with the purpose of procreation and pleasure. Like, there's a purpose behind the pleasure. That's not just something we figured out. God created it that way. But if it's a disordered desire in your life, then it leads to addiction. And what you thought was freedom, according to Freud, when you searched out yourself and you liberated yourself to be free to do whatever your body wanted, whatever the flesh wanted, did you find freedom? Is there anybody in here who found freedom? If you're at the beginning of it, you might be able to say, yeah, I found freedom, I feel great. Talk to me again in a few years. Because what it will do is it will enslave you. The very thing you thought was going to set you free because you could finally express your authentic self has now become your master. You can't go a day without thinking about it. This isn't religion, friends. When Jesus came as a rabbi and taught these things, he was teaching us about who we were as his creation. And he should know he made you. He is the I am. He was there at the beginning. He is your God. Whether you like it or not, he is who he is, and you are who you are. And so if this is the guy who made me, I should probably listen to some